the world's largest contract chip maker, TSMC, has upgraded its spending and revenue growth targets for this year as the global scramble for semiconductor chips continues. The Taiwanese company expects chip shortages for car makers to start easing in the next quarter. But the supply deficit in critical chips will last throughout this year and potentially into 2022. TSMC now expects to invest about $30 billion in the production and development of advanced chips this year, up from its previous forecast of $28 billion. It also expects sales in the June quarter to reach $13.2 billion, beating analysts' forecast. A full-year revenue could climb 20%. The upgrades come after TSMC hands in another robust earnings report. First quarter net profit jumped nearly 20% on year to about $5 billion, beating analyst estimates. Revenue rose over 25% to a record $13 billion. TSMC is benefiting from rising demand for high-end chips as more splurge on devices during the pandemic. For more, Gareth Leather joins us live from London. Well, another strong showing from TSMC. How sustainable is this, particularly as more people return to the office?
Yeah, certainly. So TSMC has been one of the biggest beneficiaries of the pandemic. As you mentioned, as people have been stuck at home, there's been this big shift to home working, to home schooling. So you've seen over the past year very strong demand for personal computers, for laptops, and for iPads. And I think what we'll see as vaccines are rolled out across the world is that demand for these items will start to wane a little bit. But having said that, as you mentioned, there's still an awful lot of pent-up demand, especially in the automotive sector, but also with the rollout of 5G internet. So I think if we do see any reduction in demand, it will be quite gradual. And certainly for the next year or so, I think TSMC's prospects are pretty good.
Gareth, Taiwan is experiencing one of its worst droughts as well. How severe will the impact be on TSMC's production?
Yeah, so semiconductor producers are very dependent on water, not so much for the electricity that they need, but more in the production process. And I think this is potentially a risk that certainly so far it hasn't been affected TSMC because it's been able to ship in water via trucks. But if the monsoon rains that are due to arrive in May don't arrive, then you could see TSMC having some problems. Having said that, though, I suspect that given TSMC's importance to Taiwan's economy, it will presumably remain kind of towards the front of the queue when it comes to getting water supplies. So I think it would need to be a pretty bad drought and for it to continue for quite some time until we did start to see problems there.
Yeah, and also, what's your take on TSMC's outlook that the global chip shortage could extend into next year? You know, potentially what could make that extend that period or maybe shorten it?
Yeah, so I think prospects are pretty good. There's an awful lot of uncertainty at the moment, given the state of the pandemic, that if we do see vaccines working and a rapid return to normality, as I mentioned, you will see some kind of fading of demand for semiconductors used in personal computers and so on. But I think the long-term prospects are still pretty good, that there's going to be this shift towards, you know, the Internet of Things, so having some semiconductors on kind of fridges, other household items. I think TSMC will benefit from all that. You've got increased investments in data centers. You've also got the rollout of 5G. So all those should really benefit TSMC. And I think that's why it's been so bullish in some of its investment forecasts. They're planning to spend $100 billion on investment in Taiwan over the next 3 years, which is an enormous amount, much higher than any other chip company in the world. So I think they're really, really hopeful and ambitious for the future.
All right, thanks so much for that. Gareth Leather there from Capital Economics.